Welcome, everybody, to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show with our special guest, Larry Cosgrove. Meteorologist Larry Cosgrove is going to be doing everything you wanted to know the weather of 2020, 2021, but we're afraid to ask if you haven't asked yet. The Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware, Long Island's largest rock salt provider. Are you getting ready for winter? Because Omni True Value Hardware is ready for winter as the largest provider of rock salt on Long Island, and it's not just rock salt, but mag ice melting pellets and flakes, Petalo premium snow and ice melter, biomelt, geomelt, spreaders, shovels, snow blowers, and whatever you need to get through winter storms, whether you are an individual or you got a full crew. Omni True Value Hardware in West Babylon, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue, 631-756-1125, or go to the website, omnitruevalue.com. And I want to give a big welcome here to Larry Cosgrove. Let me move my screen over. There he is. And Joe's not, I don't know where he is. He's running behind or something's going on. I'm not sure. What's that?
We'll send a search party out for him.
Yes, sooner rather than later. So
he's looking for what?
Your audio is a little shaky, so hopefully we'll be okay. Let me just remind my Patreon members that I put the Zoom links up on Patreon for you. At some point, you can go in and have the window open. I will admit folks in once we get to a point where Larry can take some questions from you. So just be patient. If you're in the waiting room, I will get you in there. So don't worry. At some point, I will admit you. So in the meantime, Joe's not here at the moment, so I guess we can just go ahead and get started. I want to start off by asking every year we kind of go through this same thing with these long range forecasts that seem to come out now more before the summer's even over, and
right,
and usually they have the same thing every year, which is below normal temperatures in the Northeast, above normal snowfall for the I-95 corridor. But this time around, it seems to be a little bit different. I've seen more folks going with the other way around with this, where they're going for on warmer than normal temperatures and little, if any, snow for the I-95 corridor. So maybe you could tell folks what your thinking is overall. I'm going to get Joe in here as soon as I can take care of him here. So just one second. But go ahead, Larry. If you can go ahead and tell us about your feelings on that.
Just so you know, I typically make two sets of winter forecasts, all right? There's an autumn and winter forecast I put out usually, let's say, early August. And then there's the main winter forecast, which I give my clients about October 21, 22. And then the public version, which I handed out to the people like at Facebook and such like that.
Right.
That's usually available Halloween Day. It's a little traditional one. But one big thing I look at when I construct a seasonal forecast, which is a lot different from what I can tell with people, I do not do single parameter forecast. You go out there, and you've seen this, all they do is like point out things like La Nina, PDO, where they think the MJO is going to be.
Right.
And it's a litany of things. And I warn people, look, you need to combine different aspects to look at where the forecast is going to turn.
Joe Rayo's on board.
And that's one thing I've seen. Oh, okay. Hey, Joe. What time? Let's see, buddy. Okay. I'm just pointing out here about the winter season forecast. One thing I've noticed about this is that we had a different turnout in the early fall than it was kind of normal. It was warm in both coasts, but in the middle ground there, basically from, I want to say mid-August on, it was very hot in the west, kind of cool in the middle. The east was changeable to, at times, warm or hot. And that was a clue that maybe the early forecast from the models, which were blazing warm, for the winter. Even now, like the European model is crazy warm. It's like the continent is awash in red and yellow.
Right.
And it's telling you that nothing's going to happen. And I always like to tell people, look, when it's an extreme, you balance it, which seems more reasonable. And this is why I developed my little analog system. And I just want to put up the 500 millibar forecast really quickly.
Just Larry, just 1 second. Just want to bring Joe Rayo into the conversation. Joe, I'm sorry, that was my fault. I've been doing all this technical stuff. I thought I sent you the link, but I guess I didn't.
Well, you sent me the promotion for Larry about 5 or 6 hours ago, and I guess that in your mind thought that was perhaps what you would.
No. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no big deal.
I just want to point. All right. Okay. Some of the things I look.
Larry, go ahead and bring up your first graphic like you did before.
It's besides Enzo, by the way. I mean, there's lots of things. Okay. All right. All righty. Do you see it?
No, we're back to that Windows thing again. Whatever you did before the show.
Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Hold on.
Folks, obviously we're having some technical issues, so just everybody bear with us here.
So, okay. Now it's invisible. It's telling me share.
Hold on a second. Oh, this is really turning into this is really going to be a fun night. I can sense it.
Technology, Joe. Technology.
Yeah, hang on. I'm trying to get our screen back up. Okay, I got that. There you go. Okay, now. Okay. All right. What you need to do, Larry, is bring up an individual graphic. Otherwise, I can bring them up for you because you sent them to me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. We'll get it here. All right. See here. Share. Okay, now let's try it again. All right. Open.
Yeah, we just got your Windows screen.
Now we have it.
Screen. Okay, you know what? Hold on 1 second. I will bring up the graphics that you sent that I saved ahead of time, and I'll tell you what they are, and we'll just we'll go from there. So just give me one moment here, and I got to find my thing here. Hang on 1 second. Joe, why don't you talk about current weather going on right now, just so that I can fill a little bit of time. How's that?
All right. Well, I will do that. I'll make believe I'm on the radio while we fix the video section of our show here. And another amazing day out there today, Joe. We set records most everywhere. The only place where we did not break a record was right near the Long Island shore area, the north shore of Long Island Sound, where Bridgeport, Connecticut fell a couple of degrees shy of a record, but everybody else either tied or broke records today. In Central Park, got up to 75 degrees, which tied the record from 1975 of 75. I could tell you that right here in beautiful bucolic Putnam Valley, where I am, 50 or so miles north of Midtown Manhattan, 78 degrees on my thermometer at 1:08 this afternoon. Now we got another nice night tonight. It's going to be mostly clear. That ridge of high pressure that we spoke of so many days last week has indeed built up or inflated to the point where we're enjoying incredibly mild temperatures. And Joe, remember we were talking about last week how the model output statistics were all pointing toward highs in the upper 60s to around 70.
Right.
And you and I both said, when we get into this type of a scenario, usually those models run a few degrees behind what actually eventually happens. And indeed, I don't know of anybody who was calling for temps in the mid to upper 70s. Certainly we weren't, although we did add a few degrees to the models, for what they were pumping out in terms of temperatures. But this is absolutely amazing. We got one more day of this tomorrow. Lots of sunshine. Temperatures in the Hudson Valley will be in the low to mid 70s. Will probably be again near mid 70-degree readings in many locations near the shore areas, around 70 or so. But then after that, we're going to come under the influence of moisture from a cold front approaching from the west. That front will spread clouds in our direction by later tomorrow night. An amazingly mild night tomorrow night. I mean, I want to tell you something. Here I am, or in the lower Hudson Valley, the normal low temperature for the middle part of November is around 36 degrees. Tomorrow night, it would not surprise me if there were not a few spots in and around the Hudson Valley that failed to get below 60 for a low temperature. This is absolutely incredible. It kind of almost mirrors what we had last year on Halloween, where we had temperatures in the 70s into the late part of the night. Anyway, for Wednesday, we've got rain coming from that weather front, still on the mild side because we're on the mild side of the front. The southerly and southwesterly winds will push temperatures back up through the 60s into maybe even the lower 70s, in spite of the fact the rain will become more frequent and widespread as the day wears on. More wet stuff on Wednesday night. The front finally moves through early on Thursday, will cool off gradually for the rest of the week. It will be in the low 60s on Thursday, probably near 60, only 50s to near 60 on Friday. We'll clear out. The sun will return by Friday, and looks like a 50-50 weekend with sunny skies Saturday and more in the way of showers on Sunday. But temperatures, well, if you were hoping for another beach weekend, forget it. It looks like temperatures are going to be more apropos for what you would see at this time of the year, near or above 50, which is going to be a pretty hard thing to take after what we have been spoiled with these last few days.
All right, so we got the graphic up. So go ahead, Larry. Take it away. It's we're looking at December 2020 here. You have it up on. We have it up on Zoom.
One thing here is that if you look at it, first of all, I want to say Joe Rayo is the ultimate professional. He's never missed a beat, and he's still not missing a beat. So congratulations, sir. Anyway, one thing you can look at in this map here is that there appears to be there's some blocking going on. All right, there may well be at some times, but an issue here with the December forecast is that you also have colder anomalies in the Pac Northwest and also off of the Northeast shoreline. This basically equates to a semizonal flow. It's not going to get you the cold air you need.
The blocking you're referring to on the graphic, for those looking at home, that's the area in light green and yellow. Okay, and you can see.
Right, that's the higher anomaly there, at 500 millibar. Yeah, and if you are going to get a concentrated surge of colder air east of the Rocky Mountains, all that blue you see in British Columbia and the Pac Northwest, that would be green, yellow, or even red. There would have to be a ridge out there. Instead, what's happening is that we're still not set. All the warm air we've got going on, as Joe Rayo just pointed out, it's still going to be around a lot in the eastern two-thirds in December. Could there be some changes? Yeah, it's possible. But I look at this, I'm saying it's not what we need. And indeed, the temperature forecast here, I'm going to try to get back and
just hit your arrow
and look at
just move see where your arrow is there. So you should be able to click on that. It'll go to the next graphic.
This is an analog here, 52. And then the reason I pointed this out is that it fits very closely. If you take out the global warming influence, all right, which would modify these sites tremendously, there still was a very deep low in this period over Manitoba, Western Ontario. And this matches up actually pretty well. And you see the ridge in the west. It was very hot, of course, later summer and early fall in the west. It's kind of a symptom of how I put together a graphic, a forecast, by just looking at it and saying, okay, we've got a similarity between now and 1952. And that's all it comes out to. But if I move ahead here, I point out February. Now look how much this has changed. All the blue shifts to the eastern 2/3 of the nation. That's the colder anomalies, 500 millibar. That's about, say, 15,000 feet above. This is the apt steering mechanism for surface systems. You note there's a very deep yellow, Greenland, Baffin Island, into northern Quebec. That's our ridge. This is trying to tell us that we've got possibly a negative AO, negative NAO setup, Arctic oscillation, Northern Atlantic Ocean oscillation. So with this in mind, also there's a ridge along the West Coast. This doesn't seem like it's that deep because, believe me, all of us here have seen what we would call anomalous types of weather patterns. But this is saying that if you were to look at low pressure in the upper atmosphere and then judge it where it could be, the heart of the negative anomaly is the lowest possibility, and that really is around the Great Lakes. Most of the time, the lows aloft would be over Ontario. That's enough to get you some cold air into the east. Not before that. January, I don't think works out too well. Now, if I can move ahead here a little bit.
I want to ask you.
That?
Yeah, I do want to ask you a question here with regards to the NAO. And Joe and I have oftentimes pointed out, sometimes in a sense of frustration, it seems like the NAO has been virtually absent in most of the time in the winter. Yeah, it has been there from time to time in the last 9 years or so, but on the whole, it's just not been there at all. As opposed to
you'll see that.
I mean, so you're basically saying that maybe this year might finally be the year where the NAO rears its ugly head and actually hangs around for a while.
Yeah, I really do. I just don't think it's going to happen to great effect in December or early January. You'll notice here with this ridge, it looks very impressive around the Arctic Circle. And there's also very low heights anomalies in the north central U.S. The East Coast is to the right of that, and you'll notice that the winds aloft, 500 millibar, are southwest. That's not going to get you where you want to go. I mean, you'll get cold fronts through. You'll probably be colder as time wears on, but we've run into a situation in the East so many times in the past winters where everybody to the west gets the snow, and east of the mountains, guess what?
Well, certainly the last two have been.
They get rain.
The last two have been that way.
Yeah. If you look at 2013-14 and 2014-15, there we got some breaks with the pattern where the ridging up in the higher latitudes was strong enough where it suppressed the jet and also enabled some cyclogenesis to occur, usually in Miller B fashion. I mean, there are Miller A items, where it went from the Gulf Coast and then also down, through the mid part of the country. But when you look at all this here, there's a chance that we may get back to where we need to be. I'm not saying it's going to be the begin all and end all of winters, because we've got one huge obstacle right now where you're sitting after winter in November. It's a semi-zonal flow. You look at those maps, there's no blocking whatsoever in the higher latitudes, really anywhere in the northern hemisphere. Yeah, they're getting some snow in Siberia. They're getting some snow in Canada, but it's not going to get you what you want because, as you're well aware, for early season snow and cold in the east, you got to get that snow line well down into the Midwest and Great Lakes. It's been doing nada in the Great Lakes. It's not like it was, you recall, this November of 2014,
Right.
or Oxtober, I guess somebody called it. But we've got the chance here. I want to emphasize again for people that want to get some snow and want to get some cold, you can't engage in wish casting. We see a lot of that. And I'm not trying to come down on other professionals, but rather something I see. It's like, well,
we're having some audio.
Here.
There he goes. He's
and
back.
They did that last year, and an analog of it, that wasn't going to happen. Okay, so anyway, just to curtail this section here about my rant about forecasting. The pattern you need to get is set in stone to get cold and snow in the Northeast. You have to have it. You can't say, well, there's one signature, a block in Greenland. You've got to have probably for blocks 2 or 3, because you've got to drive that vortex section down in the U.S. If you don't do that, your case is lost. And I'm saying it's not going to happen in the East in November or December, or probably before Jan 15 to 22. It might happen after that. Your best odds would be probably February and March. Look at March here. You've got ridging again in the AO and NAO positions. It's okay in the West, but even though the pattern is trying to go flatter again, you still have a deep negative anomaly at 500 millibar in the Northeast. That's an indicator to me.
Okay. The audio problems on his end, folks.
I'm going to try to use it and show you my analog years real fast. Hold on. Sorry. Okay.
All right.
So, one again, the hurricane season we've got a lot. All right. And
we're not done with that yet either.
This is that the resemblance. No, we're not. Use. Okay. And you can see the cyclone tracks we've had, and we've actually added a couple since I made this graphic. But in the snowfall forecast, now this can be a little bit deceiving, but I just want to go through. This should be a good year for Canadian snow cover. It may be okay in some sections for the West, especially early, but if you're looking for another chance to get some good snows in the Great Lakes and Northeast, it's going to be mainly the mountains and Great Lakes. The coastal plain may be normal to a tad above normal. I'm not going to go crazy with it because, we've been burned in the past by that. This is certainly not the type of situation like 77, 78. If I'm looking for the 70s, we've got 2 useful analogs, and that would be 70, 71, a good La Nina jump there, and 78, 79, even though it's not great. 2007-8 is a much better analog. You might remember that was a very snowy situation in Chicago and the Midwest, Cleveland and so on, but it didn't really do much, in the I-95 corridor. Just going through some of my forecasts here. Now let me break from this for a second.
Sure.
Emphasize, when I construct an analog session, and so I look at 500 millibar similarity from September 1 through mid-October, global sea surface temperature anomaly, all right? I also use surface temperature anomaly in North America. And I also look at sunspot activity. See, you'll find things out there where people go hog wild on the solar look, And I think it's good for one insertion in the mix. But when you add them all up, the best options you have are ENSO, global sea surface temperature, 500 millibar, and surface temperature N, that one tropical cyclone output. I don't use the ACE system.
Right.
Never have, probably never will. Because to me, it's more important to get how many actual cyclones develop to nullify the warm water balance in the Atlantic Basin with a La Nina. So that's kind of where I stand on it. But let me hunt for some more graphics here, because I do want to quickly show you. Let's see here.
Okay, then I want to bring a couple of folks in for some questions. Go ahead.
Sure.
No, I mean, yeah, so go bring your graphics up, and then we'll bring, I got a couple of people going to ask some questions.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to find it again. I'm telling you, it's amazing how this thing goes. Because I want to get the window screen back here. And hold on a second here. I'm going to try another route. Yeah, it will. This thing is cursing me, I tell you. All right. Files. This isn't going to work. All right, hold on.
While you're looking, Larry, I'd just like to throw in some comments from my end. I'm I remember a lot of past years of weather, and I do a lot of analoging sometimes. This particular November reminds me very much of the lead into winter of 1975-76, where November was abnormally mild or warm, as we're seeing now. And we continue to remain above normal through December and into January. And then suddenly, at the very beginning of February of 1976, in fact, it was on Groundhog Day morning, we had the infamous Groundhog Day blizzard, in which we saw a very moist storm come up from the Gulf states and collide with a massive polar outbreak. The storm really, when it was like injecting steroids into it, when it reached the mid-Atlantic coast. We here in New York, and Joe and I often talk about this, we could actually see on our thermometers the temperature going down by the minute. We went from like 45 to 10 degrees above within 3 hours, and rain almost instantaneously changed over to snow. And up until then, we didn't have much of a winter. But from that moment on, from the Groundhog Day blizzard through the rest of February and on into March, it was about as wintry as anyone could hope for if you were a winter weather lover. And I'm thinking in my mind that might very well turn out to be the case this year, where a lot of people will begin throwing in the towel by January, saying, it's going to be another one of those winters. But somewhere, somehow, either by the end of January or February, old man winter is going to knock on the door and say, I'm sorry I'm late. And that's going to be it for the rest of the winter season. It is going to be every bit of the kind of winter that the snow weenies will enjoy and the cold weather lovers will enjoy. So that's how I think this is going to turn out to be this upcoming winter. And it seems like you and also our guest from a couple of weeks ago, Jim Witt, seem to be thinking along the same lines, that it's going to take a while, but when it does get here, winter will finally be here with almost a vengeance by the middle and latter part of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I really think that we've got a shot this year, and it's like, I remember that year of 75, 76, that winter, because I don't know if you remember this, but there was a Chattanooga choo-choo type of storm, that was in the Appalachia and came roaring northeastward. And all the model runs were saying it would go over Philly and New York. And of course, it went about 100 miles south and east of that track. And I don't recall how much snow New York proper got, but Philly got a sneaky 2 to 4 inches. And it occurred New Year's Eve because it was raining in like 50, I believe, at midnight, right?
Right.
And some friends of mine had a New Year's Eve party, and they were told by the TV people, well, it looked like a cool, rainy early morning, but you'll be safe going home. And guess what happened? Yep. It turned to snow. It was a thick, wet 2 to 4 inch snowfall, absolutely paralyzed traffic because you have all these people coming out of parties, and it was like very difficult to navigate all the slush on the road, And I agree with you. I think that that's the kind of scenario for this coming, winter. I just don't want people to get because we've seen so many winters recently in the East where It got mild and it stayed mild. This time, I'm reasonably hopeful that it will change. We've got to talk about caveats, though, Joe and Joe,
Right.
because
Before we do, hold
we've
on,
got
Larry.
this La
Before
Nina thing going on.
right.
Now,
Hold on. Before we do, I have two of our regulars have joined us on the Zoom here. We have Norma and Janet, and you're both on the screen. So Norma, so you were first in the waiting room, so you get to ask the first question from our studio audience.
Uh-oh.
No pressure, Norma.
No pressure. Questions. I do remember back in 76, I was a senior in high school. I remember that snowstorm on February 2nd. So I'm hoping that we do get more snow, but this weather has been great so far. I'll take this. No snow, that's fine for now.
Can we take anything out of these record highs? Do they mean anything, Larry, in the long haul?
don't.
Or is it's just noise? Or is it just noise?
They don't. It's like the one thing that bothers me, it's basically what it is. It's not a proto-character. Proto-character, of course, if you look back over the years, 95, 96, remember that? We started out like with a blazing hot summer. And then September was pretty hot, but Opal started a transition over to a gradually colder pattern. And it kept building and building and building, and it reached a crescendo, of course, before that great blizzard, Jan 7 of 96. We had the interruption of thaw, and then it went right back to where it was before, where we had relentless heavy wet snow events. And I believe that was a time when, if I recall correctly, Comac had like 34 inches of snow, in one storm. And their total for the winter was like 70. And that's something notable, I don't believe that this fall is the character of what the winter will be. There's a couple things that concern me, which we need to talk about. One is that will this La Nina flatten out and start the weekend? I believe I'd like to see that happen, all right? Because if it reaches what the CFS model says, which is like down to like a -2, a deviation in the 3.4 region of the equatorial area, I don't want that, because I know what that can be. That can mean a really warm winter. But the other thing we need to look at, and this is important, is we need to get back to seeing more amplification of the 500 millibar flow.
Deeper trough in the
started
east.
Out with a mild signal. Yeah, you need to get this. You need to get, I remember 2009-10, which was the infamous El Nino year, where most of the forecasters out there went for a raging warm winter. And of course, it was a Molokai El Nino, where all the warmth was in the western lag of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. That started to turn around Thanksgiving. It was very subtle. Got a cold front through. And even down in Texas, where I live now, it got a little colder. And the forecast never changed in time. You've seen over and over again where people hang on to their forecasts. Oh, it'll turn, And one caveat I always poise to people is that if it doesn't turn by the last week of December or the first week of January, it's not going to.
Right.
If you see what's going on now, clear through New Year's, step back and look at other options. That's what I'd say.
Janet,
don't get drawn into the thing where,
you crash and burn with your forecast. Janet Dunn is she's the big cheese at the Northern New Jersey Weather Observers, and she's on board tonight. So fire away with your question, and then we also have David waiting in line right behind her. So go ahead, Janet. You got the floor.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and a lot of what a lot of people are talking about is having a back-ended, winter kicking in around February. But do you think it would be extended longer and into the spring? Like, I know we have, really going to wait till February unless things start turning around the end of the year. But do you see it trending a little bit longer on the back end?
Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you what, in the analog system, I put fourth. All right. March was a pretty good wintry type of March. It would, everything I had says it'll go past St. Patty's Day and probably make it up into the last days of March. The problem we're going to get, though, is that, like any good winter we've had in the East, it's going to come to a crashing halt. And the April analog system I used was really, really warm. And it just got warmer and warmer. I don't want anyone to have any illusions, at least from my point of view, that we're going to have one of these things where it carries, like in 2017, you may remember it like went into April, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to come to a crashing halt, but only in the last days of March. We may get some more good snow situations there. I would also caution too, that with that negative height anomaly so entrenched in March over the Great Lakes and Northeast, that we may have an unpleasant cold snap in there. And it's the kind of thing where you've seen in past winters, even when I went to spring, people wanted to start the garden, you know? That's not, I don't think it's going to be a wise move. So I would be very careful about venturing in, you know, for early spring type of situation. I think it will get there, but you're going to have to wait till the end of March.
David, you're next. Go.
Yeah, I know with the El Nino, there's a difference between if it's east-based or west-based, where the affected the weather. Does the La Nina have a similar thing, whether it's east-based or west-based?
Not so much, and I'll tell you why. When you have a La Nina construction, typically it goes three ways. One is it's weak, it's moderate or strong, but it's usually even and mild to warm on the other, like the 3.4 or 4 sectors. Now, what we've got going on now is your basic moderate La Nina. It's basin wide. I don't see much variation from that. The question mark we have here when you look at sea surface temperature charts, the Northern Pacific Basin's been very, very warm. And typically that links up with having a ridge in Alaska, Western Canada, and the Pac Northwest. If it does that with a cold streaming storm track that, you know, basically cuts underneath that through Northern California and is forced to go down and redevelop off the North Carolina coast, you can get some really, really good snows out of that. Anywhere, you know, from Northern Virginia up the pike through Maine. But looking at this, no, to answer your question, no, it doesn't work the same as with an El Nino. Usually it's either weak, moderate, or strong. Almost all the time they are basin wide.
Larry, hang on one second. I'm going to do a little screen sharing here, so just hang on a second. I think this should work. Nope, that's the wrong one. Okay, let's try this again. Let's try this again. Oh boy, this is just not worked well for me tonight. Hang on one second.
That's all right.
Let's stop share. Let me try it again. It's that one, I think. Can you guys see the map up on the screen? The GFS?
GFS surface map.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to bring up the 500 millibar first, and you know, obviously we're seeing this big ridge. There's something here, and since you work with models and have for a long time, I want to ask you this question. I'm going to run through the long term here. So, of course, our ridge in the east kind of flattens out. We get a trough that moves on through. Then another ridge tries to pop up. Another trough moves on through. Then another ridge. It's very progressive. Everything moves from west to east. And we still keep seeing the models continuing to drop these troughs more in the west and ridges that are trying to pop in the east. Now, here's what I want to my question.
Joe,
Oh,
before you continue,
All right.
I am seeing the same thing that a lot of people in the chat board are seeing, which is a blank
porn.
screen.
You're
I see
seeing
I
you're-
see satellite and
all
a
right,
couple
hang
of
on.
smaller thumbnail maps on the
So I guess
Omni.
that got lost. Obviously, this is one of those days, folks, where things just don't seem to be working right in the technical end. I don't know why it did that. I lost all three. Let's see. Give me a second here.
All right.
Let's see. Okay, are you seeing it now?
Well, I'm running behind about 45 seconds behind you, so I don't know if it's up there yet.
All right, I have a map up there, so let's wait for those 45 seconds.
384 hours.
We could run
Yeah,
the
384 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on. I see
Okay.
it, Joe.
All right. So let me just run through this again. So, all right. So
All right.
here we go. So there's your big ridge in the east. Weakens up. You can see the little tropical system there. That is Eta. We get these troughs that come in. You know, another one, another ridge, another trough, another ridge. Most of the troughs continue to drop in the west. I have found over the years that whenever the GFS model, or for that matter, even the European, whenever there's a predominant trough in the west, okay, it
Right.
will always be right. And yet, at the same time, if there's even a hint, and this happened a couple of times last winter where, and I frankly, I haven't seen this happen very often, where you've had models trying to show pattern change in the east, getting to inside 7 days, and then suddenly just flip back to dropping a deep trough in the west. Is there more? Is the data coming in on the Pacific side a lot better than what's on the Atlantic side? That has the models seem to be better at pointing out when troughs are going to be in the west as opposed to when they're going to be in the east over the long term, not the short term, but over the long term.
The Pacific is a very data poor area, believe it or not. The reason why the GFS especially keeps plunking troughs down in the west is that it's got persistence and cold bias, all right? The model, the way they redid it, you may recall a couple of years ago that somebody decided we'll get a new core, for the GFS. And they didn't do much climatological insertions for AGW, for global warming,
Right.
or to work against climatic records. So it's like basically what you're seeing is that it flips into a thing where, La Nina, it'll be a cold trough in the west. Some of these times it doesn't work out. And I think what you've seen here is merely a progression because the models have not figured out yet how the polar westerlies are going to act in this particular La Nina. They're seeing like the convection in the maritime continent, and they keep moving that out, further east into the Pacific, but that's not happened. I would just caution, look, don't use the GFS beyond 192 hours, all right? That's usually safe. We do have another issue which has cropped up, and that is the European model series has a warm bias now. You might have seen that this, late summer and fall.
A warm and a west bias.
Yeah, and it's like it just goes overboard. And okay, we know it was hot in the west in August and September, but it started to crack in later October. And now that we're in November, it's still trying to build ridges up there, which I'm not sure will verify. We're at a very sensitive time because typically in autumn and spring, because there's a transition going on, it's not going to work out very well.
Right.
You have to look out for issues on satellite imagery and also any what I call mesoscale interruptions like tropical cyclones. that might alter the pattern.
All right. Just going to bring us all back up here for a second. Let's see if I'm going to get this right. Hang on. Yep, there we go. Okay, so now we're all back. One of my regulars, one of our regulars who's not here, the chairman, Scott Briller, who's out doing his COVID runs tonight. He says that your long-range forecast for the winter has two primary storm tracks, one that cuts through the Great Lakes and one that's not far from the benchmark. So which one do you think will be the more dominant one?
Early on, it's going to be the Alberta Clipper types, all right? That is the optimum threat, as you know, for snow in the Northeast. And that's why I've got some hope this winter. Because what you're doing is taking the current fairly flat pattern with no blocking ridges and gradually increasing heights above the Arctic Circle. I emphasize the word gradual. As we've talked about before, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in December. It's probably not going to happen first half of January. But when it gets going, you probably have about a 60 to 75 day window, second half of calendar winter, where you've got systems coming up the coast and offering the chance at least for snow or a changeover mechanism. Remember, in this day and age, we keep having warm starts. The ocean has been warm, and you get any type of an easterly changeover to rain, or at least have to kick it back with some colder air on the backside of the storm. That may be a factor, but I think we'll squeeze out at least one, maybe two good snow events for the New York Metro, and indeed anywhere in 95 above Richmond.
His second question.
It may seem like it's sticking out, I think I'll do it.
All right. His second question is, and this is something we saw the last couple of years. 2 years ago, the polar vortex in the stratosphere split in early January, and I remember all the snow lovers were jumping up and down because that was going to mean that we're going to get into a negative NAO. And guess what? It never coupled down below the troposphere, so it never happened. Last year was another one of these. Well, the lack of sea ice and all the rest of it. There should be a negative NAO. And also we had neither an El Nino or a La Nina. It was a neutral year. So what happens? The polar vortex wraps up like a tight ball up there in the stratosphere. And made it look like it was a strong El Nino, strong La Nina type winter. So my question is, where are we going to be this year? Is the stratosphere going to do its thing one way or the other, or are we putting? I happen to starting to believe that we don't put enough weight in what's going on up there with regards to the winters down here. But you might have a different view of this.
I've trained myself for the past 15 years to get more acquainted with, the 10 millibar level, because there are some good clues you can get, surface, 500 millibar, even the jet stream level, say 250 millibar.
Right.
But one thing I've noticed about the vortex situation up there are two scenarios which can make the East cold and snowing. One is that the vortex that comes down through the Great Lakes in that vicinity, all right? The other one is to get a solid vortex, but the entire body is depressed southward into Ontario and Quebec. If it does that, you have a decent chance to work your magic and to get cold and snow. What's not happened in the past 4 years now is that we haven't gotten a meaningful split where the various parcels of cold air aloft stabilized in one area. It all moved and washed out. That was the problem. And I saw this, I'm saying to myself, anytime they're going to forecast an early or late season vortex split, don't go with cold and snow. You want it to occur, say, mid-December through mid to late February.
Right.
And you split, and one section to go over to Siberia and the other one to go to the Northwest Territories, because that's going to break your heart. You need to get the darn thing solidly southward, where the core is, let's say, over the Ungava Peninsula, northernmost Quebec, or when it splits, you'll find a parcel over the Great Lakes or St. Lawrence Valley. That is going to do the trick. That's the only thing really, and you can't depend on it.
Sure.
We're not yet there where you can forecast with assuredness where a vortex split and when it's going to occur.
All right. So last question here is, and then we're going to wrap this up. Is from Daniel Kirby, aka Johnny Quest, on our chat board, and he's Johnny lives at a very high elevation in the mountains of northwestern Virginia. And when it rains over there, it rains, and when it snows, it snows. And he's asking, what are your thoughts about winter for the Central Appalachians, the elevated areas of the Central Appalachians? Because he's up at he's up at about 2,000 feet.
Yeah, I think it's be a good winter for you, but again, suffering that problem where most of it's going to occur after the new year, maybe a couple of weeks after the new year. If you look at the track I've been talking about, which is the Miller B or the Hatteras cyclone, if you get a Miller B scenario, the one danger you have if you're a snow lover for Northern Virginia is that the moisture accretion and pool-in, the dynamic increase, doesn't get going until the system is past the Potomac Valley, and that's going to leave you out of the proverbial cold, because it may get a lot colder, but it won't be all that much snow. But in this scenario where there's a big, deep height-fall pattern from the Great Lakes down to Virginia and Maryland, you should look pretty good. You go south of where you're at, let's say you get below Wytheville, Virginia. I don't know. That's going to be, I know there's a lot of North Carolinians and whatnot who want to get, a good snowfall there. They may luck out, but they're going to have to depend on a solid redevelopment, maybe let's say around Wilmington as opposed to Cape Hatteras. We can't tell that far in advance. But if the track scenario forecast holds, where you get a good Alberta clipper that's deep and digging, runs into a negative NAO signature and has to reform, then you should be looking pretty good and maybe be able to get an above average snowfall. And I would say probably 40 to 45 inches is within your reach for the seasonal total.
Hey, you hear that?
It's going to occur after mid-January.
You hear that, Daniel? and actually, Daniel's up at 3,500 feet, so he's even colder where he is. I forgot that he was that high. All right, folks. Thanks for being here tonight, Larry. Thanks for joining us. It was very interesting. Your perspective on the upcoming winter. At the end of the day, we'll all find out when it's all over with. Janet, thanks a lot for stopping by. Norma's already gone. David's gone, but thanks for jumping in. And we will. Joe and I will be back tomorrow night, right, Joe?
I will.
Good to see you.
All right.
Joe again, yeah.
All right, Larry. Take care.
Okay.
All right. You can
Take
go
care.
ahead. Good night. Good night. Joe and Janet, thanks for being here. Also appreciate it. And
Thanks,
you have an open invite to get all the the Northern New Jersey members of the Northern New Jersey Weather Observers to come on one night. All right. And Joe, stay with me. Janet, I'll see you soon. And
see you soon.
Everybody, we'll see you tomorrow on the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye. All right, Joe, hang on. Don't say anything. Just hang on 1 second. Say nothing and do nothing. Hold on a second. Come on.